Now, I know we have a long ways to go until free agency, but I thought we could pause on just the season momentarily and check out some free agents for the Browns in 2024. Now, let's begin this conversation off by looking at Cleveland's marquee free agents coming up. So, guys that are set to be free agents in 2024. Marquise Goodwin, Harrison Bryant, Jordan Akins, Jordan Elliott, Maurice Hurst, Shelby Harris, Za'Darius Smith, Anthony Walker, Sion Takitaki, and Grant Delpit. There are some other guys, but I think these are the 5 or 10 biggest free agents coming up. So of these 10 players, before we look at some other free agent targets, 5 guys I would re-sign. Grant Delpit should get an extension before the year is done. I've seen everything I need to see. I'm all in on 22. I want to see Anthony Walker come back. He signed another 1-year contract. He is a major part of this locker room. He's a very big leader. I want to see A-Walk come back. Za'Darius Smith, I understand that maybe it's been a bit disappointing from him when it comes to sack productions, but he has still generated a lot of pressures. I'd like to see Za'Darius Smith return. Jordan Elliott, did not think I would be saying this a year or so ago, but Jordan Elliott has had a career year, which, what do you know, contract year. Who could have seen that one coming? So if the Browns can bring him back for a cheap contract, I'd be interested. And the same goes for Maurice Hurst as well. Now, 5 guys I would let walk. Marquise Goodwin, unfortunately, just has not worked out. Harrison Bryant, I'm not against Harrison Bryant. I think he's a good tight end, but I don't want to see the Browns overpay Harrison Bryant. Jordan Akins has not been that red zone target I think we all hoped he would have been. Shelby Harris, my favorite signing of free agency if you followed me in the offseason. Just getting up there in the age column, 1-year vet contract. Probably good to go a different direction and get some youth in the position. And then Sion Takitaki. I like Takitaki. He's having a great year coming off an ACL injury. I actually would kind of like to see Takitaki come back. I don't know if the Browns are going to want to go another rental 1-year linebacker for Walker and Takitaki, both 2 straight years. Now, that being said, let's check out the 5 biggest needs for Cleveland in a rough order. I'm going to go wide receiver as number 1. Defensive tackle and defensive end is 2 and 3. Linebacker at 4 and tight end at 5. We can debate about rearranging this list. So now let's look at 25 free agents at these 5 positions of need, starting with wide receiver. I think the biggest name is going to be T. Higgins this offseason. Don't be surprised if Cincinnati, kind of like Devontae Adams, signs an extension or signs a contract with the Bengals and is immediately traded in like an NBA-style sign and trade. Michael Pittman for the Colts. Mike Evans for the Buccaneers, 10 straight seasons of over 1,000 yards. Marquise Brown and Darnell Mooney are 2 younger guys who bring some speed. Now, I've seen a lot of people talk about signing Mike Evans, okay? Mike Evans would definitely bring some jump ball ability. And Deshaun Watson as a quarterback, well, what kind of receivers did he really thrive with in Houston? It was the jump ball type of receivers like DeAndre Hopkins. Darnell Mooney is interesting. He had a phenomenal start to his career in Chicago. He has cooled off the last 2 years, but he could definitely bring a much-needed speed element to this wide receiver room. So with that being said, I think I would lean towards Darnell Mooney. He's younger. He'd be cheaper, but we got a long ways to go to figure out who to target in free agency. Now, before we get on to the rest of the free agent targets, there is no offseason here at the Cleveland Browns Report. We arguably, almost like as bizarre as it might sound, pick up our coverage in the offseason because we know, hey, not everyone else is going to put their foot on the gas in the offseason, but we're not going to slow down. So make sure you subscribe. That way you do not miss a single thing when the offseason kicks in. Moving on to some free agent defensive tackles. We talked about Jordan Elliott and Maurice Hurst. I'd be open to bringing both those guys back. Sheldon Rankins, a longtime New York Jet, and now with the Houston Texans, he's having a really good year. Teair Tart and Grover Stewart, some AFC South kids. Grover Stewart is going to be a much more expensive player. I don't think the Browns are going to have big bucks at D tackle again. So I'm looking at Teair Tart. If the Browns decide, you know what, we'll bring back either Elliott or Hurst, maybe they decide to go with a Tennessee Titan like Teair Tart, someone I was a big fan of last year in free agency. He's not going to fill the stat sheet. He's not going to have a lot in the box score, but he's going to open up other opportunities for other players. He's going to be a tree stump in the middle of that defensive line. Ultimately, there are some bigger names out there at defensive tackle, but after spending a 3-year, 4-year, $57 million contract on Dalvin Tomlinson, I do not expect the Browns to break the bank in back-to-back off seasons at the same position. So, yes, Chris Jones and Christian Wilkins are free agents. Lower your sights at defensive tackle. I think we're going to see an earlier draft pick at defensive tackle. Let the rookie and Siaki Ika battle it out for a spot in terms of the rotation, and maybe another cheap veteran re-signing or signing, kind of like Maurice Hurst and Shelby Harris. Now, like I mentioned, Siaki Ika has not played at all this year. He's been a healthy scratch, and I know that frustrates people, and it kind of frustrates me as well because I want to see what you have in the guy, but I don't want to just play him for the sake of playing him because you want to see what you have in him. I'll tell you what you have right now in your other 4 starting rotational defensive tackles. That is really good and highly consistent play. So you're not going to take snaps away from Dalvin Tomlinson or Jordan Elliott to see if Ika can do anything. And I like Maurice Hurst and Shelby Harris more. So yeah, if this team was not 7-5, but they were, 3-7 or 3-10 or whatever, I'd be open to having a little bit of an exploration moment to see what you have in the rookie. But for now, keep going with the veterans. They are playing at a very high level. This is not a time to mess around. Now, before we get on to the rest of the free agent targets on today's show, Prize Picks is back, and they have an awesome deal for the dog pound. But let me tell you all about Prize Picks first. Here's how Prize Picks works. You pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and the more selections you make, well, that increases your potential winnings. So take this Sunday's slate of games. I'm taking the more on Bryce Young and Matthew Stafford's passing yards. We saw Stafford start to heat up on Sunday. Bryce Young is going to get that boost that you get after your head coach gets fired. I like the more on Drake London's receiving yards against the Buccaneers and the more on Javonte Williams' rushing yards for Denver against a bad Chargers defense. Now, you can get up to a $100 deposit match when you go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a deposit match up to $100. The link for that is in the comments and description of today's video. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Let's talk about edge rusher now, because we saw last offseason, even after the Browns signed Okoronkwo and drafted Isaiah McGuire, they still wanted to add more depth to that position, so they traded for Za'Darius Smith. So don't rule out the Browns adding more at the edge rusher spot. Who could it be? Za'Darius Smith is going to be a free agent. Chase Young, Danielle Hunter, Jonathan Greenard, Leonard Floyd. Now, I'm open to Za'Darius Smith returning. I was not open to Jadeveon Clowney returning after the way he exited the facility last year, but I know there's going to be a lot of Buckeyes fans watching right now that want to see Chase Young come back to the Buckeye State. And he is with the 49ers on the last year of his rookie contract, and I bet San Francisco is right down the middle when it comes to bringing back Chase Young. They gave up a 3rd-round pick for him, so it's not like they gave up the farm system for a guy that becomes a shoo-in to get a contract extension. No, I don't think they're going to compound a mistake if they do not like what they get out of Chase Young this year by giving him a big contract extension in the offseason. So I think there is a very real chance Chase Young hits the open market. Now, between these two guys, obviously Chase Young has a little bit more of a pop because he's younger, Defensive Rookie of the Year, and of course, he did a lot of great things in Columbus. But if Za'Darius Smith ends the year on a high note, I might lean towards Za'Darius Smith. I know from a lot of boots on the ground and ears on walls and whatnot in a lot of facilities that back when the trade deadline was going down, a lot of teams were interested in Montez Sweat over Chase Young. Montez Sweat ended up going for a 2nd-round pick. Now, I think there was a bit of an overpay by the Bears, but regardless, I think people need to lower their expectations for Chase Young. I would lean towards Za'Darius Smith. Moving on to some free agent linebackers. You've got Anthony Walker, Levante David, Blake Cashman's having a really good year for the Texans, Azeez Al-Shaair for the Tennessee Titans, and then Frankie Louvu for the Carolina Panthers. Who am I picking out of this group right here? I'm picking number 5, Anthony Walker, a captain of this team for 2 straight years, the heart and soul of the middle of this defense, the leader and everything. I would love to see the Browns bring back Anthony Walker. I believe the Browns will re-sign Anthony Walker. If I'm Andrew Berry and you've gotten the best out of your defense as you had this year as your tenure as the GM of Cleveland, I don't think the first thing I would do in the offseason is let's move on from the captain that's the middle linebacker. That doesn't scream like a good idea to me. So I think Anthony Walker will return with the Browns. I'm not quite sure if it's going to be a 1, 2, or 3-year contract, but I am pretty confident that Walker will come back to Cleveland. Final position of need for the Brownies. I'm going to go with tight ends. You got David Njoku, but after that, you've got Harrison Bryant and Jordan Akins on expiring contracts. So maybe you see Gerald Everett, Colby Parkinson. Parkinson is a really good blocking tight end. I feel like if the Browns are going to go for a tight end, they're not going to swing for a big, sexy receiving tight end. They've got that in Njoku. They're going to go for a guy to help in the ground game and a blocking tight end, and Parkinson can do that. Pharaoh Brown, Harrison Bryant is definitely a candidate to return, and Hunter Henry. Now, Pharaoh Brown is an interesting guy because, one, he was with the Browns last season. He joined them mid-year. He's from Northeast Ohio, and this year with the Patriots, sure, 170 yards and one touchdown does not jump off the screen, but he has been an excellent run-blocking tight end. And with the Browns having interest in him last season, don't be surprised if they pick up the phone and see if he wants to come back and play for his hometown team. Now, before we get on out of here, we talked about 25 names. I want to know who you want the Browns to sign. Is it one of those 25 guys we looked at? Is it someone else I left off my list? Let me know down below in the comment section.